Welcome again to our weekly workshop. We're very, very pleased to have Seema Pandya with us. So once we get everybody in and settled, we will be sure that we do all our housekeeping and our introductions. I'm David Freeman. I'll be your host. And if you feel like sticking around after the after the presentation officially, we can unmute and we can all share each other's faces and we can have like a casual chat afterwards. So that's coming afterwards. So thanks for sticking around for all of those who can. Before we get going, a couple of housekeeping items. For those of us who are new to Zoom, on the top right corner, you will see a little view icon, and you will probably want to select the side-by-side speaker mode once Seema gets underway. A lot of this will be slides and PowerPoint. So usually the best way to view it will be you'll see the slide on one side, and then you can have Seema on the other, and that's the side-by-side speaker view. And then there's in the middle, there's a little like stripe that you can click and drag with your mouse to make one side larger or smaller. That'll help enhance your viewing experience. And if you have any questions about that, please go ahead and you can ask in the chat. I'll be more than happy to help you. Also, we wanted to let you know that Brooklyn Raga Massive has upcoming event. The Ragini Women's Raga Massive event is coming up at the end of March. So I think we're going to be taking the next couple of weeks off on our Tuesday sessions, and we will be focusing all of our attention to the Women's Raga Massive's Ragini event. So please check out our website and our Facebook page and all the socials for that amazing event. And we're happy to provide free, open, inclusive programming to everybody week in and week out. And I think we were doing some sort of data mining the other day. And since the pandemic last March, our weekly workshop offerings have reached over 25,000 viewers. We're really, really happy about that stat. And we're really thankful for everybody who comes week in and week out and shares news of our workshops and our programming with others. We couldn't do it without you, our audience and our community. So thanks for coming and thank you for supporting. And if you're able to support financially or otherwise, please, it's never too late. Every little bit helps. You can go to our website and you can go ahead and donate to the nonprofit South Asian music and cultural nonprofit that could and would be more than happy to bring you in the fold and make all of that support well worth the effort. So without further ado, I'd love to welcome our special guest is Seema Pandya, a friend of mine, a friend of many of you that I see on this screen. And it's just so fantastic to have you here, Seema. Seema, if you don't know, is a multidisciplinary artist based in Brooklyn. Covers the gamut of sustainability, art, culture, the environment, systems within, without, above, beyond, below. What a fantastic mind to kind of have such a refreshing and intricate, comprehensive perspective and point of view when it comes to the arts. And what I love about Seema is that not only is Seema interdisciplinary artist of such depth and thought in her own right, but also that Seema is so involved and in such relationship with the music as well, which really, I think, informs her work, vice versa, all around. So without further ado, Seema, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for that very warm introduction, David. Thank you. And it's really exciting to see so many friends and some family and colleagues and all kinds of people joining today, and all of you out there also on Facebook land and beyond. So to get started, I'm going to. So this is, I know most of you who have been attending the BRM weekly sessions are used to seeing musicians or dancers occasionally and more performance based. I am a visual artist, so this is going to be a little bit different. And what I'd like to do, I've presented my work before, but I'd like to use this particular talk as an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into kind of the roots and inspiration of where some of my visual ideas are coming from. So I'd like to break the talk up into a couple of parts. I'll give you some background. Then we're gonna talk a little bit more, bear with me here, but we're gonna talk a little bit more about, a little more esoteric cosmology and ecological principles, because that's gonna feed into, I think, a lot of the work that we'll see. I'll try to move not too quickly through it, but enough so that we can get a good meat into it. I'm not used to really talking about those roots, so I think it'll be really fun to really dive in there, and then we'll take a deeper look at the work. So to start off, I wanted to talk about my seeds as me. I'm going to just take a minute to share my screen. Give me one moment. So, my seed started with my parents. Can you all see my screen? Yes. So the seed of who I am really started with my parents. My dad is an engineer, very practical, very down to earth, extremely grounded person, and my mom is an artist. So not only did they represent, physically my seed, but also I'd say in spirit, I find myself sometimes battling, but ultimately trying to find this journey of bringing the left and right sides of the brain together. So balancing that very practical and logical side with the side that is more adept to swimming through the chaos and diving into creativity. And so from a very young age, I really wanted to do both. And I'd say even up till now in my life, I'm still striving to find that balance between these two things. And growing up, I've always made art. So it's not something that's brand new, but over the years, it was, encouraged to keep it up, but keep it as a hobby, keep it on the side, and do something more practical, as is typical of a lot of South Asian parents. And I found myself also really drawn to ecology in the built world. And so I pursued a career and I'm still pursuing this career as a sustainability consultant. So I've worked with an amazing company called YRG Sustainability, and currently working with D2D and the US Green Building Council as a lead reviewer. So in that, I'm guiding project building teams through how to design ecologically sound buildings, ones that are more sustainable, basically. I also teach sustainable design both at New York School of Interior Design and at FIT on the graduate and undergraduate level. Hopefully, I think some of my students may be here today. So, that has been going on for a long time. And in terms of that, fulfilling that left brain with, a lot of creativity as well. But alongside these parallel paths has also always been one foot in the arts. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was co-owner of a space called Revoluciones Collective Art Space in Denver, Colorado. And that was a very gritty DIY underground art, outsider art gallery. And we really spent a lot of time and effort building community for mostly visual artists. And a lot of you out there may know me as being also involved in Brooklyn Raga Massive. So I'm on the board of directors and, have worked with the collective for us to form our 501c3 and was our first executive director in the earlier days of making this, helping build creative community. And all the while also making art on the side. So I've always kind of had my feet in two worlds. Now, on a professional side, I'd say it was about 8 years ago. And at this point, I had worked on over, you know, probably 40 different sustainable buildings. And there was something just inside of me that was like, I'm getting older, and I love this work that I'm doing, but I have this artistic side that is being suppressed a bit. And it was self-suppression, and there was part of me that really wanted to find a way to join these things together. So the more I started looking for where my worlds already were meeting, there was a lot of articles out there and more that I could find that was talking about how creativity could really be a seat of change in terms of climate change and the world of sustainability. Because part of the problem, I was helping architects and contractors design these beautiful buildings, but people would see a plaque on the wall and maybe say, oh, I think there's something green going on here, but not really necessarily knowing what it is. Or sure, the building saves water, but do you personally care about the water cycle? Do you know about it? Does it infect your heart? And so there was part of me like, I want to start looking in this realm. And more and more research coming up that half of our problem is that we as a species are becoming more and more emotionally detached from the environment. So how do we reconnect? And we know that art and music and this realm really is that affects our spirit and affects our heart. So I left the wonderful company I was working for to try and make room to start pursuing the arts in a more serious way about 8 years ago. So that began a pretty serious journey in terms of, well, what is that going to look like? What is the, and but even more than that, what does it mean? And so I started with something that has been in my mind for quite a while. I just started with my name, in a sense, and it's been a question that's come up for a long time. And I can't see the chat right now, but I imagine we have some Hindi speakers amongst us. Who here knows what the word Seema means? You could type it in the chat, and David will call it out, whoever gets it right. Anyone?
Okay, we have some submissions on their way. We'll give it a few seconds for the brave. Nitin says a boundary.
Okay, ding ding ding, you are correct, Nitin. So Seema means boundary in Hindi. And as a child, that really bothered me because, you're children, you don't want boundaries, you want to be boundless. And I found myself like, I don't want to, like almost thinking badly of myself because I didn't want to be a boundary. That didn't sound very fun. But, my attitude about it started to change. And now I would say it's become almost a focus of my work. So I'm going to let David take it from here, right here.
Thank you. So, it's really fascinating to hear how your history plays out. But before we hear how your history and your experience in your personal life plays into, different, your evolution, I was wondering if we could just for a moment have everyone who's here, and I know that some of us are on Facebook as well, and I just say that there's a little bit of a lag between us here on Zoom and Facebook, so appreciate everyone's patience as we kind of sync everything up. But I was wondering if people could just kind of take a breath and empty your minds for one moment, and I'd like you to fill in and complete the following sentence. And if you could put that in the chat, that would be great. So my prompt for you is a boundary is, and you fill in the blank. Okay. So a boundary is. And when you type it into the chat, you'll also start it with that sentence, a boundary is. And we'll just give people a few seconds to meditate on that and put it in the chat. And thank you everyone for participating. This is fantastic. Really nice. Can you see the chat, Seema?
Somebody said boundary is protection. Another person said necessary. Another one said it's a challenge, unlimited, simply a possible parameter, protection and creativity. A boundary is a place to stop, an invitation to go beyond, definitive. Boundary is a river. Ooh. Boundary is self-created but needed at times and meant to be crossed. Challenge to cross the thresholds. Are limitations constraints on your potential? Okay.
And then we have in Facebook, a boundary is a framework. Thank you, Shelley. Neil says it's an opportunity. We love that. We also see Farhana, limitation. A boundary is limitation. Sri Lanka says a boundary is opportunity. And horizon. So Farhan, I don't know if you were also, but yeah, really great stuff. Thank you, everyone.
All right. So, okay, please bear with me. I'm going to do my best to talk about some of these more abstract thoughts about what a boundary has come to mean for me. Early on, when I was upset with myself being a boundary, I think I was looking at it more from like an existentialism type of perspective where, there's the need to define reality in terms of thingness being in and of itself this unique thing that is separate from something else, and when something else is there, the object comes into view, and objectification happens. And I think that that for me didn't seem to be a full picture. We're really looking at it being defining thingness as that inherently sets up a sense of duality automatically. And then on the opposite side, this is a quote from Ken Wilber's No Boundary. He's a philosopher in integral philosophy, and he's basically is summarizing Eastern thought and things like that. So, really the tenet of Eastern thought is that there are no boundaries, and boundaries are an illusion, and just the map. And certainly we can think about when you start thinking about what is a boundary, where do I draw the line between myself, what's inside and outside, or even what's me? For example, we know that the human body contains about 100 trillion cells, but only 1/10 of that are actual human cells. The rest of it is combinations of bacteria and viruses and other microorganisms that we need to actually be living beings. So in a sense, whatever I think is me is really only some percentage human. So where do I draw the boundary of even what's human and non-human? But we do know that there are certain boundaries in systems. So if we think about a body, yes, a bone cell is not the same as a digestive cell or the circulate, but really it gets a little fuzzy, literally gets, and visually gets fuzzy when we try and zoom into where the differences really are. And speaking of fuzzy, this is your digestive system, which has all kinds of fuzzy fuzzy ends just to have increased surface area for it to be able to digest food that is some foreign substance. So again, fuzzy boundaries. This is mycelium. And then the next two slides came to me from a former colleague of mine, Ashley Muse. When I was at YRG, she shared some slides introducing us formally to systems thinking and the works of Donella Meadows. And when she presented these two slides, it really just struck me because I had already started doing visual work that was a reflection of this, but when I saw these slides, it really just kind of made sense to me. So one thing she pointed out was that when you look at a boundary between two adjacent systems, so here we have land and water, they don't dissolve per se. They more, the land starts to bend and crack and form in fractal ways to include and exclude so that there becomes a blending of water, but it's not a dissolution. So this is also a slide from my colleague Ashley's presentation, but that these two systems start to increase their surface area and interaction with one another. And this, like in a river delta, is where the heart of diverse life comes. Rather than water being dissolved and earth being dissolved, they start to exclude and include. And that there's also a pattern to the way that this happens. And we see it as fractals. This is the Himalayas. Here we can see it in our blood vessels, in our heart, in lightning. And if we zoom out even far enough, this is a theoretical picture of what the cosmos may actually look like. The cosmic web composed of massive filaments and galaxies. So there is even at a major macro scale, similarities into what shape this inclusion and exclusion may take. So when we look at, going back to our boundary, my view started to shift from it being, okay, so the boundary is not really about this and that or you and me, but what if we're paying almost too much attention to the things that are on either side of this zero line, and instead, instead of looking at the heads and tails, there is already a resolved a resolution of this duality, and it is the edge of this surface. It is the edge boundary that is between, and maybe we shouldn't even use the word between, but among these two sides. So it totally started to, flip the coin in the way I started thinking about boundaries. And so instead, if we put our attention onto the boundary itself, this starts to become more of almost an evidence of a relationship. And so when we think about even just the very beginning form of including and excluding, almost like a push or a pull or flow and resistance, and whether it be on a personal level or if we were to take it on an atomic level or electromagnetic level, there is a certain amount of, existence and resistance. So here, if we look at the very basis of a sine wave, and we look at like this moving piece here, there is some force that is causing a limitation, that is pushing back. And if it wasn't pushing back, then a wave would never exist. And I'm going to take a little bit of poetic license here, to maybe even go so far as to say reality itself is boundaries, is a web of boundaries. And maybe there is no thingness. And again, maybe that's going a little far out on a line here. So most of you probably know, the yin yang as being the symbol of resolving dualities. But so now moving more into like a visual sense, in between the yin and the yang is again this sine wave. In playing with this sine wave, you can flip the yin and the yang and then join them together, and this is what I call a node. You're gonna see this in almost all my work. This is kind of a little formulaic building block, and has become almost like a cornerstone of a lot of my work. This little mushroom form that has this perfect resolution of inclusion and exclusion. And we do see it in nature. So this is a Carmen Vortex street, which is in fluid dynamics. And I'm just learning this. I'm not an expert in any of this, but these you can see is the relationship between something at flow and something that is static. And so this is, we can see it in this example. You can see those same shapes here in cloud patterns, whereas the islands, these Cape Verde Islands, this is a view from NASA, are causing the resistance. So again, we're looking at a relationship between flow and resistance. And we also know that nature has a pattern to the way that its boundaries are. And they are self-replicating and repetitive at various scales. An example here of that we see in a pattern. So again, going back to our line, that the line may not just be, a push and a pull, but we're looking at it on multiple scales as well. So that kind of just concludes just the beginning part, just so you can kind of get into where I'm thinking. I'm going to let us take a little bit of a breath here. David?
And I'd like to encourage everybody to, if there's any questions or any reactions or responses, please feel free to type them in the chat. We'll be monitoring those. So anything burning or anything in response so far, we'd be happy to hear from you. So go ahead and take a few seconds to type in the chat, and we'll talk a little bit more about that.
I realize I'm taking lots of poetic license here, but these are the things that I'm feeling.
And I was just like seeing Joyce is watching via Facebook, but I love the idea of the immune system as a boundary, looking at your immune system as a boundary. I thought that was interesting to look at it that way.
Okay, I'm gonna continue then. Let's see. Should I keep going, or does anybody have any burning questions? Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, feel free. Perhaps they're just being shy, but yes, let's.
Okay. All right. So then going into the work itself, this is on all kinds of a timeline. Some of this is happening simultaneously. This is not exactly the linear pattern in which the work has taken. But I did start out doing more painting first. So here you can see in this piece, one of my earlier pieces, you see those same mushroom forms, but it's not here. It's not only just repetition. I feel like at various scales, but you have big portions of this same language being repeated and flipped on each other, so that now we're also building boundaries between flipping like negative and positive space. So it can almost become like an op art type of thing. Here's a couple of other examples. I'm just gonna let Only self-portrait so far. And then this one was the last painting I did. This one I'm really excited about, mainly because of how many layers, how many kind of almost like fractal layers were able to come from even just repeating the same basic mushroom principle, because it's all that. This one is fun too. We'll play a little. I'm just going to play small hints of this. This is from one of my Tabla pieces, but into an animation. And so, what these may look like as they start interacting with each other, almost as in moire patterns. I'm going to forward through this just a little bit. And that's Neil Margai's throat singing harmonic overtones in the background. And a collaboration we've been doing together. And I found it just so interesting how, like, in working on this piece, how these forms just lend themselves to reconfiguration and even just interaction with each other. And if you want to watch the whole thing, you can find it on my YouTube channel. But we'll move on. Oops. Okay. So then even you know, another angle that I was taking was also looking at not just the form itself, but informed by more of the sustainability side, what the materials themselves say. So this is a piece, integrated direction, that I made for my friend, for a friend of mine, Sarika, and this is made from reclaimed architectural samples of bamboo that I had carved into and cut into like puzzle pieces. And this is another piece that was made from 100-year-old oak that was recovered from another building project that I was working on for Delos, one of their very early apartment buildings. And so this was panels that they removed from the building but didn't want to throw away, and so I was able to take some of them home and use them. And Delos was also being supported by the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Climate Initiative. And Chelsea Clinton, I was commissioned to make these statues for an organization that then awarded one of these to Chelsea Clinton, which was really a nice little full circle in terms of material, the history of the material.
Wonderful. Yeah, we got like reactions. The Tabla piece looking like hands or wings, and some imagery of lovers, intertwining lovers. And also Julie was saying how some of the earlier work you presented reminded her of synapses. So a lot of different dimensions and dynamics, and that is being evoked in the work that you're doing. Anyone have any questions or anything burning at the moment?
So we've looked at, like, from a more of a 2D perspective so far. And so now going more into what this kind of push and pull would mean on a three-dimensional scale. And, at the time, I think this was like 2011. My partner at the time was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, sadly. And I remember looking at his MRI, and actually being slightly fascinated just with the imaging of the brain itself, and looking at those same the movement of a push and a pull, and what we've what I've had been working on from this more of a 2D layer, and then asking myself, God, what would this look like to take these same shapes and start pushing them in and out from a to invoke movement, and what might that look like as form on 3 dimensions. So this is these are just slices, just the design slices for some sculptures I'm going to show you. So this is 3 nodes, so 3 nodes going in and 3 nodes coming out, and what one pulse would look like of them pushing in and pushing out, and their relationship to each other. So I'm going to show you kind of just what it looks like graphically, and then we'll look at it on in the sculpture itself. Once again. So this is kind of what the movement of those nodes may look like. Oops. Pause. And then this is what it looks like as a sculpture. So this one I call, so there was actually I've been currently working in 2 different series. One of them I call my amoebic void series, and the other one you'll see later. What I really like about this amoebic void series is when I made my first sculpture, which is this one right here, this was the prototype, they're internally lit, and I found that people really wanted to look inside. They wanted to pull the top off and take a peek inside. And part of me says, no, I don't want you to look inside, but I want you to want to look inside. And but what also drew me to some of the thinking behind this series is that, there is a creation of a form that you see, it highlighted here in blue and here in this purple and green. But the form that you see is not actually really there. It's not solid. It's only there in your mind, and it is formed from the relationship of the line between the negative and the positive space. So really, it's this unreality reality, the reality of my boundaries, I guess. So this is the basis behind these void sculptures. And what's really nice is not only is it the void, but all the pieces that get cut out of it. This is unfinished right here, but all the pieces that get cut out also become their own sculpture that they then can be cut out again and again and again. So you're also not seeing any material waste happening there. Here's some views from there. So you can just keep taking little bites out of it to create new spaces. And then here is that same concept. This is called the Seed of the Void. This was displayed in Prospect Park, and is made from reclaimed fallen trees that the park. I worked with the Parks Department, the Brooklyn Parks Department, or the New York Parks Department. And it's a little simpler in form just because of how much I'm able to manipulate the limitations of being able to manipulate the wood itself, but the simplicity I really liked. So this was so this is Seed of the Void. And those were again salvaged from fallen trees that the Parks Department collects from all over the several boroughs and normally mulches up. And this is the last of those pieces that I've made thus far. This was made last summer. This is a bench for Brockport College, and it's also made from trees. Unfortunately, these were trees that they cut down for a building project in the college, but the college did commission me and a few other artists to make benches. So these were made by hand, which was really a lot of physical labor, but a lot of fun. And we'll just look at a little bit of a three-dimensional view of that. All right, and like I said, it was really fun to work with my hands with that. I learned how to use a lot of new tools. But this is again just a journey and the beginning. So I did want to talk a little bit about where I see it going. Several years ago, when I was introduced to the Brooklyn Raga Massive and this whole community, I also met Alexandre Tenuz, who has now started the Resonance Collective, which I'm a part of, and is really kind of a leading mind on the edge of what the intersections are of sound and consciousness. And so he introduced me to just the idea of semantics, which I had never heard about before. So semantics is a study of the relationship of sound on matter, and it was started. There were hints of it in like the 1800s by Robert Hooke, but then what you're seeing here they're called. I may be mispronouncing this, but Chladni figures, and so essentially what this is these are some sort of vibrating plate, and you either put it on top of a speaker or something that is allowing it to vibrate, and you change the frequency, and it starts making these very natural patterns. And it's not going to be the same pattern every time unless you're using the exact same material, but it is a result of the relationship between whatever forces are within the material. So some people use sand, salt. You could even use ferrofluids, or cornstarch and water makes some pretty interesting shapes, but also based on the boundaries of what the plate itself is. So because I feel like my forms were already intuitively going in this direction. Now that I know about cymatics, the next step for these amoebic sculptures would be to actually create a cymatoscope and use slices from different frequencies and things like that to experiment with, and use those as the slices. Here's just some really interesting views of some cymatic X-rays taken in water. So that's kind of where I see it going. Any comments?
We have a comments, but mostly, everyone's, we're taking so nicely to the work that you're doing. Amy was wondering, with some of the sculptures that you have been working on, in terms of movement, you ever thought of making one that slowly turns on the stand? So I think maybe.
Maybe we should look at that. I have that in later, but maybe we'll just jump right to that one. Why not? Hmm?
So that's one of the questions. Um, yeah, just people are, they think it's fantastic work. It's fascinating. It's fun. I like the play between negative and positive space and how the positive actually lends form to what is absent. So what is absent becomes very present and appears as form. I love the play of that.
Not even the absence that you're seeing. You're what you're seeing is the edge between like absence and non-absence.
Right.
You know what? So you may, yeah, yeah. It's fun. Okay, so let's jump back in and see what else we've got. Amy, I'm going to jump to the movement portion of that, and then we'll go back. So this was a piece, amoebic merry-go-round, and it's where I took those same that same shape concept from the amoebic void sculptures and basically created like almost like a turning maypole type of well, why don't I just show you? So here it is. It was cut out using CNC cutters. But here you really get the sense of growing forms. There's Neil. I've written about this piece in grants, and I like to say it runs on fun and glee as a renewable resource. And this was shown in at Governor's Island. So yes, they do move sometimes.
So Seema, just one question. I like this from Adriana is wondering about, do you think about when you're doing your work, and this is particularly in relationship to the water and cymatics, do you imagine educational components to your work when you is, I guess, so the question is, do you imagine an educational component in relationship to water cymatics with where you are heading?
um, I think for sure. I think it lends itself to that, especially because, I mean, um, what's been really fun, I think, about these amoebic void pieces, and even just the drawn form itself has been it's been a really intuitive process, but and then I'll come across these things in the natural world. I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe I was just instinctively like going in this direction, but now this makes more sense. But I feel like with cymatic, if I were to integrate cymatics into it, would be something taking it deliberately from I'm taking this principle and applying it. So I in that sense, I think it would definitely lend itself to an educational component, for sure, because we're talking about like, fundamental forces. And there's a lot that I also need to educate myself on. This is a growing journey. So if anybody knows of any, you know, math theorems or things that I should be looking up, put those in the chat too, because I feel like I have a lot of research ahead. Okay, let's go back in. All right, so jumping back, I guess. Oh, before we start too, the next section I'm going to go into is going to talk more about a whole other direction. So it's another. I don't know, David, if you wanted to do a prompt at this point too.
Yeah, I just really I enjoy the how you give life to materials that once were discarded, giving second life or repurposed or giving new purpose to materials. And I was wondering if we could just do a little thought experiment with everybody here. Can we take a 30 seconds and can everyone just maybe enter in the chat if you feel comfortable sharing um, anything in your life that you have yourself come upon that's been discarded that you've been involved with giving a second life, and what was that moment, or what was that thing? Just interesting to see what some people have to share. Anything that you've come across that was discarded but you've embraced and given new life, or even repurposed, where in your life? And no wrong answers. Everything has value, and everything is appreciated.
Yeah, and maybe as people are thinking about it too. Yeah, so the next series I call my Tabla series, and they are made from discarded tabla heads. And so I was learning to play tabla through the Talam School, that's based in New Jersey, when I first moved to New York City. And I think that was back in 2009, maybe. And it really struck me as we were like learning these kaida patterns and all of these rhythmic patterns. My mind was looking at them visually. And then it really struck me like, oh, maybe I could use, wouldn't it be cool to use the materials themselves? And my friend Mike Luxius, who is with the Thalam School, he and a lot of other people would do repairs on the tablas. And because they have so these are some tabla heads behind me. It's not a virtual background. But these heads would have like several thousand hours of practice each in the leather themselves from musicians touching them. And the most interesting thing is people did not want to throw these heads away. Even though after they get worn out or torn or stretched out and they don't make the same tone anymore, people still want to, people would hold on to them. So they would end up sitting in people's closets and things like that. Well, Mike Luxius had put together an entire huge bag of like a few hundred of these that they had saved up over the years. And as they were trying to clean out stuff, he just gave me the bag and said, "You're an artist. I'm sure you'll figure out something to do with this." And I did. I basically sat on them for several years before I became involved with the Brooklyn Raga Massive, and it really clicked, just kind of altogether what to do with these pieces. So so now it's like kind of also not only just looking at materiality and the form, but also in cultural context for me. At one point I also went to Ahmedabad, where my father's side of the family is from, and worked worked with local artisans who were making these tablas and who were repairing these tablas. And it was actually, it was really interesting not only to see how they were made, but that, people, even these folks, they can't reuse this material. And there were bags and bags just sitting in warehouses for years. And I'm, at a certain point, I was getting funny looks from people like, who is this crazy woman from America who wants to pay us for our trash, And but yeah, so I bought. I ended up, purchasing a lot of this discarded materials and to kind of breathe some new life into them. Yeah, very, very, very fun. So this piece was the first tabla piece. And I went really big, really fast, almost too big, too fast. This one, actually, I had to take apart a few months afterwards because it just was not really able to hold the form the way that I wanted. But this one's called Tabla feedback. So it's almost like a sound bell feeding back into itself. And it was part of our, Brooklyn Raga Massive's residency at Pioneer Works. We had 13 weeks in 2016 where some amazing, not only musical projects were birthed, but this entire Tabla series was birthed there as well. So I started making them furiously so that we would have a new one almost every other week for the performances that we had. So here you can see some of the musicians playing under it. This one's called Tabla Tapestry, and I have two of them. This is the piece that I have behind me, so you can maybe even get a sense of scale. It's about like 5.5 feet across and about 5 feet tall. But again, that's still repeating that whole mushroomed sound piece. And they were used as backdrops for some of our performances. And I made two of them. And, because of, from, earlier in our talk, we talked about, the boundary being also about resolving dualities and forming, forming a relationship. So I actually made two of that, purposely to be, to emphasize the space between them by almost creating this squeezing of space. So that they would be arranged in this manner. And this same theme happened in this other piece, Tabla Synapse. So these actually, to me, the beginnings of these forms were about trying to mimic what I felt like a bell of sound may look like, given the materials. And not just sound, but they also, well, so in this piece also, it's got the emphasis on the space in between as being a necessary boundary for a relationship. Here's a close-up on that one. And then this one is called Tabla Geodesica. This one is actually 2 separate layers. And I started using a new technique that I wasn't doing in some of the other ones, where I started using a tighter kind of knotting system. And it actually created its own sense of stiff form. So it would start to hold itself up in what is known as, the term is like tensegrity, where all of the different pieces, like in your body, you have a sense of tensegrity because of all of the ligaments are pulling and pushing it such a way that you get structure and you get stabilization. So because of where all of these points are joined, and the strength in which they're joined, they again create structure. And this one has a light inside. And this one's called Rhythm Within. So it's also that kind of similar bell shape, but now going inside. It's almost as if though the sound is digging inside. So this becomes a hollow that pushes back. And this was the first time I started using ink over here. This was also the inside piece I made by hand to be like a miniature tabla head. But this was the first time I started using ink on the leather itself. This is India ink, which is essentially soot. It is, a charcoal, almost like a charcoal residue mixed with water that essentially then dries as a more solid carbon layer. But it's also what early indigenous people used for tattoos was India ink. And so it seemed pretty appropriate to use as the main ink for these tabla pieces, being also on leather. This one is called mitochondrial thal. So this one is inspired by mitochondria in the body, which essentially is the part of the cell that is the digestive portion. And it works by folding in on itself and increasing all of its the surface area so that it can, like the digestive image that we saw earlier. But again, this repeats a lot of the exact same mushroom inside outside negative and positive space pieces. And this one is the most recent. This one's called Tabla diaspora, and it's two hemispheres, two very large hemispheres of these pieces that are again held together by tensegrity, each piece attached to themselves. And I have a quick little just video so you can experience it in more real time. Okay, and then this one, I'm forgetting. Oh yes, cytokinesis, tabla cytokinesis. So another thing about these pieces is that the tabla head itself already has this natural black circle in it that is part of the sound. That's made by the artisans themselves, the tabla makers, and it's a combination of iron filings and atta, which is a type of like a wheat flour, plus a few other binders that they use to create this this hard piece. But they also look like biological cells with a nucleus. So some of the themes I'm also drawing on are purely biological. So this one's called cytokinesis, which is a stage in cell division where all of the genetic material has already been duplicated and it moves to either side of these new cells, but the only part that's it's just before the cells split off. And they're just joined together in this small little section before they pinch off and become their own new cells. So that's called cytokinesis. So I named the piece after that. Here's another piece where I feel like it's playing a little bit more with the dimensionality. And this one's called Tabla fascial thala. So in the body, the fascia tissue, fascia is a type of tissue that it's almost like a fatty tissue that that holds all of your organs in place, and it coats all of your muscles, and it's this connective tissue that's throughout the whole body. So in this one, I wanted to create that type of connection, playing on that idea of this fascial tissue. And here's some details. And then these are leather pieces, leather strapping that are I wrapped around wood dowels and attached to the piece. And so here is it installed in a friend's house or one of my supporters' patrons' house in Houston. Okay. And then now we'll move on to some of the last pieces, which move away from these two series. And I know I think we're running a little bit over, but we're almost done if folks want to hang for a little bit longer. But I'm happy to take any questions or any comments at this point too before we go into the last piece.
Yeah, I was just wondering, just from the chat, Nitin was talking about, had mentioned, do you think about, I'm just kind of reinterpreting, so pardon me, everyone, for kind of interpreting your chat, your chat comments, but do you hear sound or soundtrack and accompaniment to your sculptures? Is that how does sound play in your process? And if it doesn't at all, do you hear sound once a piece is finished? So just your relationship to sound and music with your work.
The fact that they are like musical instruments is definitely not lost on me, but I wouldn't say that I hear sound per se. It's not that I'm making them and then I almost want to say I feel sound. And so earlier when I talked about like the kind of this push and pull movement, that's more of a feeling than it is literal sound, at least for me. But and even when I listen, like for example, when I was learning tabla and I was listening to these rhythmic patterns, to me, I would like almost feel them in these different like progressions of like patterns and groupings and this sort of stuff. So in that sense, I would say that's how the music plays in. But it's been really fun working with Neil or Guy, literally working with sound, as then for those types of pieces, then I'm taking his literal sound and animating it into the way I see it, or vice versa. I'll do an animation and he'll create a sound to go to respond to it. So yeah, I'd say that's really how sound is kind of coming up for me.
And that kind of speaks to a follow-up question about collaboration, when you think about collaborating with other artists or assistants, perhaps, to make a larger installation work. It's not lost on anybody how labor-intensive and time-consuming your work is. So can you maybe speak to the experience of that, the undertaking of crafting your work? And maybe you can talk a little bit more. I think maybe in the next section actually might speak more about collaborating and where partnership might come in.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Yeah, where I'm wanting to take this, and I think you'll see in some of the upcoming slides, is a little bit more into the public art realm, and through that, some of those are so large scale that it's very difficult to produce myself. And again, there is a difference in the crafting, like here with this piece that we saw earlier. This one, it's just so many cuts and things like that that it's a lot easier to use a CNC. But then some of them I do cut by hand myself, for some of these types of amoebic pieces. And the craft itself is a different, the act of cutting itself, when I'm doing it versus a machine, I like doing it because then I feel like more of the quote unquote music, getting into the flow of concentration and where your mind is, where you're locking everything else out to make a cut, or to make a in painting or whatever it may be, where you can enter that artist timeless sense of time, that obviously you don't get when a machine does it. But certain pieces would take you forever to finish if you were doing it by hand. So it is true that there is some back and forth. So this one, for example, was very labor intensive. This was a piece, and I see my friend Adriana is online. She actually brought me into a place she was working called the Fountain House, and their culinary unit had no light, no natural light, and they had a hydroponics unit. So I was brought in, and I created this tree-like sculpture, that was a functional sculpture for them to grow herbs in. But this one I actually had another friend of mine fabricate the skeleton out of metal, so that inside the trunk of the tree, if you will, right here, this door opens, and the trunk of the tree held all of the guts for the hydroponic movement. And then the arms of the tree out here is what where the plants would be growing, and they all had their own self internally lit growing lights above. But so this all, I also worked with my friend Will from Signs and Wonders, who helped craft a lot of these boxes, and we worked together on the boxes. But it's a lot of labor to work, for sure. So this is a kind of a more of a departure from anything you've seen, but this was also dabbling in, going a little bit more literal in almost like ecological or activism. This is a piece called Christmas Tree Massacre, and the idea came just from seeing all these discarded Christmas trees year after year and thinking, my God, this was a living thing. And just feeling that it's just like this dead corpse, like laying on the side of the street. And so one year I decided to make about 200 of these faces, these dead cartoon faces, and toe tags that say, cause of death, and how CO2 captured 1 ton, what it's, all of these types of funny little antics. But me and a bunch of friends went out, and for 3 years we put out these faces on Christmas trees wherever they lay, all over the city, and it was really, really kind of fun. But in summary, where I see some of this work going is taking a lot of those pieces and parts, and I'll probably still, make some work that is continuing the series. But where I really want to I see this work going is in a place where it's collaborating a lot of all of those different parts. So the cultural, the material, the ecological, the all of these things that we've been looking at. So this particular piece I'll show you was it's a proposal for a competition in 2014 called the Land Art Generator Initiative. And they choose a site every year. And the year that I participated, they chose this site in Copenhagen. This one right here, this patchy green land right on this shipping, this arm that's like a shipping hub. And they give you a lot of the background data, and your only parameter is to come up with a very, very large civic size proposal design for art, for public art that will generate electricity, that will actually make renewable energy. And so what I did is I used this competition as an experiment for a process. So, in architectural design, there's a lot of shredding that happens. So, where you throw a lot, you look at all of the angles that you can together and you come up with ideas. And I thought to myself, well, what if we could do this in an artistic sense? So I brought a lot of my friends from different backgrounds. One guy was, designed wind blades. Another guy was a carpenter. Another friend, does a lot of renderings and things like that. So people from different backgrounds, and we started to, we built out this process where we were not going to put pen to paper, and we were going to start with just having these context conversations. What's the wind speed like? What's the path of the sun? What's going on in the region? What's the cultural history of the place? What's the economic and even social culture and norms that are going on of the place? What are the aesthetics that are shared by this area? So in Copenhagen, it's a lot of like horizontal lines and natural woods, and so taking a context from the place and really examining them before just running with an idea, trying to dig as much as we could. And we also decided to come up with almost like a mission statement, so that as a group we would be coming from a shared purpose. And so the rule was that, okay, you're going to come up with ideas, just write them in your back pocket, and then later we will share them. But often what happens in these collaborative processes is somebody has a great idea and they throw it out, and they say, oh, I've got this idea, and everybody just kind of rallies around it, and then all exploration stops in a sense. So this was a way to hold off that. But then from that place of like as much information and influence as you can get, then you start to design. And so we started to come up together with a lot of different iterations, and what we came up with was this piece called Windglade, that we collectively created and came up with, that was based on essentially the feeling of being in a forest, and how we wanted people to have a connection, an emotional connection to wind. And primitive people, or for millennia before we lived in houses or in buildings, we were more in tune. And for example, if you're walking in a forest and you hear the leaves start to rustle and the wind starts to pick up, you hear it. And there might be a storm coming, I better take shelter. So there is this knowing what's going on in the weather or in the local climate just based on your senses. And so it's like a reconnection. So what we wanted to do was play on that sense of sound and wind, and wind speed, by creating these wind chimes. So it was all using, the idea was to use reclaimed wood from the shipping yards themselves, and then essentially have these mechanized, with metal on the inside and automated hammers. So when the wind speeds really picked up, the high tones would hit ding 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 ding, but when the wind speeds were low, then it'd be like boom boom. The really booming low tones would hit. So you could listen to know what the wind speed is without having to look at some data. Oh, it's it's 75 miles per hour. That it was imparting your, or engaging your sound with sound more. And then we also looked at Copenhagen, where it is in the in terms of where it is on the planet. They don't get a whole lot of sunlight. So we wanted to celebrate the day that they, the summer solstice, where they actually get the most light. So we looked at the solar and angles and oriented it in such a way that maybe it'd be a place where people would come to celebrate the summer solstice. So again, this was all theory, a lot more of conceptual ideas, but that's where I see it going mostly. And that's pretty much all I got.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Um, yeah, Adriana, I love Windglade. Yay to collaboration. Yeah, more social environmental art. Yeah, here. I agree. Any questions or anything burning in the chat? And while I guess we're doing that and you're getting your thoughts together, everyone, Seema, I just wanted to thank you for spending so much time with us tonight. And I wanted to thank everybody both here on our Zoom and on Facebook, our Facebook audience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're a first timer, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. We're going to kind of officially close this official portion of the broadcast, but we will stay on for a few more minutes afterwards, and we'll allow everybody to unmute themselves and bring yourself up on video so we can actually see and talk to one another. But please continue to tell your friends and family about our events and our programs. Again, we're going to take a little bit of time off the next couple of weeks from our Tuesday events, just so that we can prepare and bring you Ragini, the Women's Raga Massive. So please check our Facebook and our website out for all that information. We have some fantastic artists joining us for that program. And if you are in a position to support us, please, we are 501c3 and your donations are tax deductible. You can do that on our website as well. Every little bit helps. We couldn't do it without our devoted community. Thank you so much. Seema's website was posted on the chat, so please feel free to visit and stay in touch with her. I remember my first time, actually, one of my first times hanging out with Seema, she had me enthralled, and she was just happened to be working on a presentation about oil pipelines, and I would never thought about oil pipelines the same way again, and actually did change my life for better. So that maybe you can recall the day. But thank you so much. We're going to officially say goodbye, but unofficially allow everyone to hang out. So please stand by. Thank you and good night to the virtual world out there. And Seema, thanks again.
I just want to say, if folks want to stay in touch, if you go to my website www.seemalisapandya.com, I do have an area where you can join my mailing list. So if I've got, I try to put out once a year. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Just a newsletter, just talking about any new works that are happening, or if I have new things coming up. So you feel free to join my mailing list and Facebook and all that kind of stuff.
Great. Thank you so much. And good night until next time, everyone. Thank you.
But let's all but folks that want to stay, right? We're